Hi and welcome to ABACAST, the podcast for all things Abacus. And I'm delighted to welcome a good friend, Lloyd DeVincenzi, on the podcast today. Welcome, Lloyd. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Hale and hearty.
Great to be here. You look hale and hearty yourself.
Thank you very much. Lloyd, of all the people that I know, I dare say you're the one that has had the most interesting and diverse professional journey across the years. You've done so much that's, and each bit possibly different to the other. So can we jump into that a little bit to kick off with, and you give us a potted history of where Lloyd DeVincenzi started off and how you've arrived where you are today?
Yeah, happy to. That could be a very long story, but I'll try and keep it short. And they do say variety is a spice of life, don't they? So, briefly, you know, I was born in Gib, proud Gibraltarian parents and all the rest of it, and then moved to Canada and came back. And so my professional life has been here, effectively. I did hold a couple of jobs in Canada, but certainly my legal professional life has been in Gibraltar. And you're right, I guess it's been varied. I mean, it's very nice of you to say that, you know, it's perhaps more varied than most or than many. Private sector at first, so I've had a number of roles there. I started off at a Gibraltarian law firm, one of the leading ones. And I guess that and my subsequent incarnations in the private sector have been very closely linked to banking, financial services, private wealth, trust, that sort of area. And again, depending on how much time we have, I mean, I can...
Take your time.
Fair enough. I mean, it was, law firm, then in-house for the subsidiary of a Swiss private bank. It had its own banking license in Gib, and in fact, it was the only entity, as I recall, outside Geneva that had a full banking license. So it was a very interesting experience, and I think like many Gibraltarian experiences of a similar nature, you get this bird's eye view in mini version of what a much bigger center can do. So that was an invaluable experience and exposed me to the world of Swiss private banking. I got to go to Geneva pretty often and a few other places in Switzerland and elsewhere, Bermuda, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, hugely interesting. And then from there, I ended up working as in-house counsel for a new private family office, effectively. I think it was one of the first ones in Gib, actually. I think I had a good background for it, although it was a heck of an adventure. The founder of that, the business that led to the private family office, if I can put it that way, was a hugely dynamic individual. And we were going at 150 miles an hour every day, 24/7 for many years. So that was, I always think I packed 20 years of experience into 5, or a little longer actually. Fascinating experience. I should mention there perhaps, which might be of interest to you and your viewers in terms of the diversity of work that's available in Gib as well. I went from counsel for the private family office to, in effect, an arm's length firm that serviced that family. So we had other clients as well, but we serviced that family primarily. And I was a trustee as well of their wealth, so it was a different setup. But again, hugely interesting challenge in all sorts of ways, professionally and personally. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And when that sort of came to its natural end, I ended up with a public service, sometimes called the civil service. I prefer the term public service, but that's a whole other discussion.
Is that because it's become less civil than?
Possibly. No. But
sorry, I interrupted.
No, not at all. I'd always had interest in EU matters and public law generally. And an opportunity came up, and I seized it and loved it. Really, thoroughly enjoyed it. Worked with great professionals, and in the end, I did some legislative drafting and was fortunate enough to be designated Solicitor General the last couple of years of my time in government. But dealt with all sorts of issues, and I might say that whatever the upside or downside, or the various upsides and downsides of Brexit, from a professional point of view, it was hugely interesting, because what ended up being midway through my career in government, Brexit happened, And so we were dealing with, as a result of that, with UK officials in a way that I don't think we had so systematically and so broadly in many years, just because of the nature of what we needed to get involved with as far as how GIB might be affected and what deal might come of it and whether it would be included in the original deal or the deal that the UK ended up negotiating with the EU. So all sorts of EU and constitutional issues, as well as the bread and butter issues that I dealt with, if I can put them that way, as far as advising ministers and others on everything from environmental law to all sorts of other things. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting. I mean, and in your usual understated way, the fact is you became the Solicitor General for the territory, and kudos to you.
Thank you.
You now have a new incarnation, which we can come to in a minute. But before we leave the history part of it, not just because Mark Carney is now running the country and he's a man I have a lot of respect and time for, and his intellect in particular,
right.
but also because just generally I've had a huge admiration for Canada and the country for a very, very long time. It just, from this distance, it's always seemed like a very well run, very disciplined, very kind of high caliber kind of place. But can you just speak a little bit about how Canada, Canadians, and that culture impacted you and your thinking going forward?
Gosh, I didn't expect that question, Chris. That's interesting. Well, look, I left when I was 10. I came back when I was almost 30. So,
well, I mean, those are hugely formative
well,
years.
Exactly. No, exactly right. So, I suppose one of the things, I'll answer this way. I mean, it clearly affected my way of thinking in a number of ways, but one thing I particularly admired about it, and it was very noticeable to me even as a boy really, was just how open it was to the stranger, to the immigrants. In the best possible way, people couldn't have cared less who your father was or where you were in the pecking order or anything like that. And it was noticeable, it was palpable. It was sort of, without over either dramatizing it or making it sound too cheesy, it was, it still is, I think, a project, right? It's a country that is new in many ways, in perhaps surprising respects for Europeans. It's actually quite old. But in many of the respects we talk about conventionally, we'd consider it a modern country and a young country. And it really did feel like you were there to sort of help build the country, and if you were useful and you didn't have too many airs and graces and you could just get on with stuff, then they'd like that. And I liked it. And that struck me. And I guess that sort of egalitarian, if I can put it that way, impulse is something I've carried with me. I think Canada does strike a good balance, though, because it's still a constitutional monarchy, so it does like its tradition and its institutions. But
it has welfare.
It has welfare. It has a national health service run by the provinces. I mean, it's quite complicated, but it's very recognizable to somebody like you and me from a Commonwealth country or a European country. So it has all those nice sort of egalitarian and European impulses. Somebody once called it like sort of the Scandinavian version of the US, right? So it has these nice things about it, which are, on the one hand egalitarian, on the other hand, maybe not unlike a Scandinavian country, it does defer to tradition in, I think, just the right sorts of ways, at least ways that I find appealing still.
I think the influence is there, even audibly in your accent. You're still carrying the accent.
A little bit, yeah. It comes and goes. It depends who I'm speaking to a little bit, and there's traces of it. But I've been back so many years, and my wife is English, and so if I'm on the phone with a Canadian friend, which happens very rarely, although a bit more frequently now that we have Zoom and all the rest of it, I might catch up with a friend, and my wife overhears me. She says, "Oh, you've got into full Canadian mode," because it just sort of, I think I'm a bit of a chameleon that way, probably, unconsciously, but yes. Yeah.
Well, I think the value of having that kind of potted history for the people listening to this is to demonstrate the extent of the international perspective you bring to things. And I think that's valuable in the context of the discussion we're going to have. particularly from your time in government. I think that's hugely relevant because I think if we focus in on Gibraltar, the territory, what it's driven to achieve and its current place, perhaps I can kick off with that. How do you see Gibraltar in the context of not a global context, but in the space of where we're trying to go for fiduciary services, financial services more generally? What's your MOT? I mean, where are we?
Yeah, a fair question, and I am a little bit more distant than I was, from it. Although again, I'm being back in the private sector, these issues are coming to the fore professionally for me. Again, I think we're in a good place, and I think if you look at, to take one benchmark, the evaluation we've undergone through Moneyval. Yes, we know we were put in sort of the doghouse for a little bit, but we came out of it, and I think there was a very sincere and genuine effort on behalf of everyone, all stakeholders, and that's one of these buzzword stakeholders: government, industry, everyone. I think pulled together in the right way to make sure that we genuinely met these objectives as far as possible. And if you look at the not just the reports, obviously, but also the follow-ups. I mean, we've done pretty well on the technical side there. We had a lot of work to do, I think it's fair to say, in a number of areas, not all areas, in terms of operational effectiveness, right? Because it's all very nice to have these beautiful laws on the books, but if no one's enforcing them, or if they're ignored, or if people don't even know about them in the right way because they haven't been communicated, well, then it's fairly useless. I think that was, and I think anyway, all those efforts were recognized by Moneyval. And insofar as one can be scientific and objective about these things, look, talking about fiduciary services, and I don't remember the exact recommendations, but I think it was 22 and 23, which deal more directly with designated non-financial businesses. I mean, there's probably like one, recommendations 1, 10, and then 22 to 25 deal with trusts and trust services and designated non-financial businesses. But I think if you look at 22 and 23, 22 was with due diligence measures by the industry. There we went from partially compliant to, in effect, fully compliant. They give you a C, which is compliant. That's good. I mean, that means here you have this international benchmark that says you're in a good place. Your MOT, you're more than passing the MOT. And if you look at 23, if I'm not mistaken, which was sort of other measures that need to be taken, and is it covering all the right people? Is it covering whatever new professions that have come up, and the crypto industry, if I'm not mistaken, just these emerging professions, or professions that maybe aren't emerging but weren't covered before. We were already, I think, largely compliant, and we stayed at largely compliant. So we're not at compliant, which is the highest standing. So C is the highest standing. So that's pretty good already, I would say. Now that's in one specific area. So I think, look, we're probably, MOT, yeah, we're sort of, I don't know, mid-tier plus, somewhere there, I think, which is not a bad place to be. I think, if I may say, and I'm thinking back to the 2007 IMF report, I mean, one of the things that I think happened there was that it wasn't a terrible report. Again, it depends what you're focusing on, what areas you want to focus on. But I think there was, we were just sort of given leeway to say, well, maybe this could be improved now, sort of get on with it. And I'm not sure we did sufficiently. That's not necessarily any one party's fault. I say party in the wider sense of the not political party, but so I think there was a sigh of relief to some extent that it wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. And if anything, it sort of said not bad. So I think bottom line is that we can't rest on our laurels here. That's for sure. We need to go with this. And maintenance is boring, isn't it? Once you're at a certain stage, you think, okay, sigh of relief, and then kind of you slack off a little. It's a human tendency, and it happens to institutions and governments and whatever else. So I think the key thing will be to maintain that reputation and that effectiveness, and in good faith, because at the end of the day, we don't want bad business. We want good business. We want clean business. We want the right kind of institutions and firms and people to come here who are here for the right reasons. I think it's a great story to tell those people, and we need to get that to them, that message to them, and they'll come. Whereas if we slack or slacken, or slack off, whatever the correct expression is, that isn't good for anyone.
Slipping backwards, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hugely comforting to me that I know someone who's as familiar with the minutiae that I can just default to if I ever need to. But you've mentioned two things already. One, which is Brexit. Yeah. And now the kind of regulatory or kind of performance backdrop to where we needed to go as a jurisdiction. What we haven't mentioned yet is who you currently work for, what you currently do. That's, you are the local partner for Appleton Luff.
Appleton Luff, yes.
So in addition to perhaps talking a little bit about the firm for us, what was the influence or the impact of those two big strands on the firm's thinking in saying, we want to be in Gibraltar, we want a man in Gibraltar? Lloyd, will you do this for us?
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Is that a fair question?
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. Yeah. So, to answer the first part of your question, we're an international law firm, about 40 lawyers in total. So not massive, but with a pretty good global footprint. The profile of the firm is essentially one to do with public international law, in particular international trade, international investment, investor-state treaty arbitration, which is an area that's particularly well known or developed in GIB, with a few related areas, if I can put it that way. So competition law, which is broadly linked to those sorts of areas, what I would call international economic law. So maybe the interaction of individuals and firms with the state and with international organizations and international bodies and national ones as well. So that's kind of the profile of the firm. The partners who founded it, one in Brussels and one in Washington, D.C., are super accomplished guys. One of them in particular has a very strong academic leaning, so he teaches at the World Trade Organization, for example, in Geneva. He's an expat American. The other fellow is a very international guy who's born in Brussels, but I think Irish. That's the Luff part. Irish parents, but a Bulgarian Italian mother, and he's lived everywhere, and is a member of the bar everywhere, and a really lovely guy. And they founded it 30 years ago, again, with this profile in mind. So international trade, international investment. A lot of the work that the firm has done has been aiding or advising state actors, which is a fancy term sometimes just for states or emanations of the state. So, maybe a ministry of a particular government, for example. And one thing that, just to give you an example, that came out in our, so I can say this, it's not like a client to slightly exotic, but Timor-Leste. In its accession to the WTO, our firm helped them accede. Effectively, we were among several advisors. So kind of interesting niche work. Trade has always had a huge appeal to me for various reasons to do with intellectual stimulation and potential workflows and all sorts of reasons. How it's linked to politics and economics, which are two other areas that fascinate me. So that's the sort of profile of the firm. And yes, I mean, I think the ferment around Brexit was fed into my discussions with them in terms of what it could mean to open an office in GIB and pursuing some of those lines of work and other areas of work potentially. I mean, there has been, and this goes back slightly to our conversation 2 minutes ago, getting the Gibraltar story out even to some of the partners of the firm has been fascinating in itself, because they thought, some of them have said, wow, we didn't realize GIB offered X or Y, or didn't know about funds in the way that or maybe they'd heard something. But interesting discussions we've had internally around what GIB can offer, aside from the potential around the sorts of areas I've mentioned, which fit into the firm's wider international profile.
Yeah, I suppose perhaps because there's an excess of navel gazing in relation to Brexit and kind of people thinking, well, was this the right thing to have done? The fact that the firm has made the decision to be present here post-Brexit must imply, therefore, that there are some positives to be gleaned from it. What do you think those might be?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, clearly the fact that, I mean, we don't know what's going to come with a deal if a deal comes, right? But I think the potential to access Europe in a bespoke way was in their minds, but that wasn't the only reason. They were thinking it might be a good idea in our discussions about opening shop here. The fact that we kind of in a both complementary way to that, but also maybe in a almost a contradistinction to that way of thinking. And again, this is maybe the beauty of the point that we're in and may yet get to. Our distinctiveness, one way or another, we're going to be distinctive, I think, in wherever we land. We're not going to be the same as everywhere else. At least I hope we're not going to be the same as everywhere else, because I think, part of our strength has always been how we're different. That's how we've made our economy work, is not through our sameness with the hinterland, but with our distinctiveness. And so I think to the extent that we would be, in the best possible way, freed from what otherwise might be great for other people and might have been great for us in the past, which is EU regulation and being automatically in step with EU regulation, insofar as we could be different from that. Well, that's also interesting. I mean, regulation across the board, not just in financial services. That hasn't been an area that our firm has been involved in directly, historically at least. So I think that sort of potential to look at a place that might have some kind of access to Europe in this, ironically, because of the deal that is being negotiated, not Brexit per se, but also, well, if Brexit stays in the way that it stayed, what could that mean anyway in terms of, say, continued access to the UK and maybe the distinctiveness of GIB itself as a place to do business for various reasons, including its attractive corporate tax rate, etc. So, I think the business case was as much broad as it was deep, but they found it an interesting and attractive jurisdiction, as we all should, I think, as many investors have.
I think that's a very realistically sanguine view of the way ahead, actually. I'm gratified that you've expressed it in that way. I think we share that from at Abacus. We do have a positive outlook on what's going to happen more generally. Perhaps it's just because we're naturally sanguine. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but
I'm sure it is.
But I do think we do see a good future ahead, and
I agree.
Whatever may happen.
I'm with you.
Just rotating around again to an earlier part of your experience. The little exposure that I've had to in the family office world, I have had some, not a great deal. Holding structures, trusts, foundations tend to be kind of the go-to armory of the practitioner in a family office in terms of structuring and what should we be looking at, and what can we build? What's the architecture that we can establish in relation to this particular asset? How can we hold it? Has Gibraltar been a good place for that kind of thing traditionally in your mind? I mean, was it the case? You were flying at 150 miles an hour, as I understand, so maybe you didn't have time to dwell on this kind of thing. But
no, again, a fair question, and I think I'll answer it this way, because my experience with family offices, or the family office in particular that I was part of, was kind of bolted onto in different ways, and then advised from at arm's length. It had its particular characteristics. So in my particular case, the driver for GIB wasn't that, but it was sort of the cream on top. So I'll get more specific. Yeah. So they came to GIB because of the legal framework that was favorable to their industry, and it was, wonderful for them to come here and establish their business, etc., and then to float their company, which was the first company ever to be floated on the London stock, Gibraltarian company to be floated on the London Stock Exchange, and so that was the main attraction to Gib. And then this was again a family, effectively a couple and a few others, but I think for them they couldn't believe their luck, because having found a place that they, in some ways, I think indirectly helped develop to become a place that was welcoming to their industry, and then they could float their company. It was like, wow, on top of that, this is a common law jurisdiction that's safe, that we understand, that can allow us to have all these things, a trust that we can understand, we can have holding structures. I mean, the very kinds of things they wanted to structure their wealth, and they could do it through Gib and with some cross-border elements, to be sure, and we were leveraged on other structures they had elsewhere. But where Gib was truly the hub. So it wasn't the driver for them to come, but it certainly, I think it's fair to say, it kept them here. So it was, as I say, I think it was this wonderful bonus, almost a byproduct. But perhaps they would have, had they known, they would have just reinforced in their mind where they should be here in the first place. But as it happens, it was like, this is unbelievably good. This is exactly what we need. All these things, and you can do them in Gib very, very well. At the time, bear in mind that the exempt company existed.
Wow.
Still, it was it's sort of scary to think how long ago it was, because it seemed like yesterday, but it was 2006, 2007. So we were in the sort of the death throes of the exempt company, I guess, at that point. But it was still a viable thing, and obviously it's still very attractive. Our current setup is still very attractive. So it was hugely. They couldn't believe their luck, I think.
Yeah, thinking back to that. Every time there's been a seismic shock, like you've got to stop doing exempt companies and whatever else has come after that.
Yes.
The industry reels from the blow, somehow recovers from it, reinvents itself, and stands. And we're becoming a little bit blasé about that kind of reinvention ability. But notwithstanding that, it's possibly strange that it's taken us this long to lighten upon tax and the tax regime. But again, from your background in the fiduciary world in particular, but just more generally in financial services, to what extent do you think the tax regime here is an influence, if not a critical influence, on the choice?
On the choice, I suppose it would depend, again, from my experience, which is going to be partial and limited, and it is what it is. But it will depend, I think, on the sector. Is it an industry? Is it a family? Is it why are they coming? It will influence some actors more than other actors. For sure, it's relevant to pretty well everyone, I think, who wants to come here. The attractive tax rates. But again, I think it speaks to Gibraltar's strengths. That I think this is true more generally. If you look at an international perspective of why does, to answer this slightly obliquely, why does Europe and North America and Japan continue to attract investment, and why does it outstrip pretty well everywhere else? You think about all these other markets elsewhere, which people do invest in. It's because of the rule of law. It's because of a good judicial system. It's because low levels of corruption. It's a lot of things together that make a place attractive, including tax, of course. And there are other places that will be more attractive, I suppose, tax-wise, conceivably. But if people are driven only by tax, that's a legitimate concern. But I think for people who want to do business here, I think they look at a constellation of factors, and tax obviously will be a very important one. But I don't think a sophisticated business will ever look at that in isolation.
Yes.
Some businesses will, and God bless them, and that's fine. But I think sophisticated businesses and investors will be looking at a constellation of factors, always, of which that is one, of course. And depending on how important the other factors are, it may feature more or less, or figure more or less importantly in their overall calculation.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at only at tax, in effect, it's a race to the bottom.
Well, exactly.
You end up being BVI, and not disparaging the BVI. Been there, done it, bought a T-shirt, love it. But I think you're absolutely right. There is that constellation of other factors that must come into the appraisal of where's the good place to go.
Exactly.
But of the factors you've mentioned, which is the rule of law, the jurisprudence, kind of ability to litigate if you needed to, all of that kind of stuff. Again, benchmark GIB for us as with the internationalist perspective that you've got on it. Have we ridden the wave? Are we saying goodbye to the kind of the bits that I would say, that wasn't great? Are we entering a new phase? Are we getting better?
I'd like to think so, because I'm sanguine and optimistic as well, just like you. I think there is a mismatch between our objective reality, the objective reality of Gibraltar as jurisdiction, and possibly our reputation still, sadly, I think, which is why we have to make sure that we are always attentive to every aspect of how we govern ourselves, because that has implications for all businesses. So, look, I think it depends a bit who you ask. You look at a global perspective, well, there are massive global actors whose sole mission in life, Tax Justice International, what are they called? Tax Justice International. Wonderful organization, but they will be looking, so global in perspective, but will be looking at things from a particular prism, right? They have priors, they have prior assumptions, I'm not questioning them, but I'm saying, as opposed to IMF or global industry. So I think, again, you have to sort of unpack even a global perspective and say, well, there are lots of global actors who will have different perspectives. But with all those caveats, again, I would say, we're doing well. I think objectively, we're in a good place, and I think getting better. Again, let's look at, how we've done, admittedly with some nudging and the nudge of being part of Moneyval. But, we volunteered for that, and we, as it were, and so we accepted those disciplines and we've welcomed them, and that's been a good thing. Versus possibly what might still be out there, a perception of GIB as being maybe mid-tier when we're at least mid-tier plus. Yeah, is that a?
I think that's one kind of one angle for it. I suppose I come at it from a slightly different angle, or perhaps a second angle, which is that in whatever area of business you're in, people smell very clearly and soon when you have integrity.
Yes.
And I think the integrity of how you approach business, and that the alignment of what you say and what you do is absolute, then I think you're on a winning ticket. And I'm just hopeful, again, being sanguine about it, I'm just hopeful that we are emerging from a long period. I'm not attributing it to more recent events, but just more generally that there is a wider perspective on the importance of integrity in our business dealings, not just in relation to your business as an individual, but to the wider territory as well.
Yes.
And I think that's really important, actually.
I agree, and I think again, I think we're of a piece on this, and I think you're right that we're there and moving to even better places. And it's precisely because of that, because of how things have broadly, I think, improved over the years. And I think back to '97 when I arrived here sort of full time. I had sort of been coming back to GIB from Canada from the mid-90s, say '94, I guess. I first came back to GIB, for a little bit, and then moved back full time in '97. And coincidentally or otherwise, I think we began to see how changes there were along those. Around those times with the OECD initiative and many different initiatives, which I think on the whole have improved industry, have helped us improve ourselves, and so I think again I agree with you in terms of the smell test that people have when they come here and deal with people and deal with industry. But I think it's once they maybe a perception meets reality, I think they will realize that GIB is a serious place with serious players, a place where you have real professionals and high standards, et cetera. But I worry still that perhaps there is a bit of lag in perception, at least in some sectors in the wider world. And that's a shame, which is why I'm always keen to tell the Gibraltar story and why we yeah, we should continue to mind our steps, I guess.
Well, you've been a fantastic advocate for the cause, so thanks for coming on. Before we close up, though, I'm not going to let you...
Likewise, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not going to let you go home without telling us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay.
What does Lloyd like to do on a weekend? It's Friday, so, I mean, you must have plans with some...
It depends on the weekend, but... Well, today, and I have to say it's exceptional, going out for dinner with a couple of friends, some very close friends who actually I met while I was in government.
Nice.
So, yeah, so that's probably atypical or atypical, however you want to say it. If I'm honest, weekends are usually fairly quiet for me.
Okay.
So I'm a bit of a homebody. I like to socialize on my terms, typically. Probably true of my wife as well. We like to socialize, but probably we like spending time at home. We still have one adult child at home and two adults. Sorry, Frank. Sorry, one of them was leaving.
He's already feeling the bruise of that one. So we might have to edit that bit out.
2 adult children at home and a third who's studying, so who comes home. So we like to spend time with them because they are out and about often. So, we still value our time with them greatly. And if I look back on the 150 miles an hour and all the rest of it, even in Gib, which offers a wonderful lifestyle, I look back at, half the time when they were growing up, my mind was elsewhere. I was, you're a young father, you're building up your career, you're trying to put money away, and it's stressful. It can be stressful. And so I think, well, they will be the judge. I think I was I tried to be an attentive father, but...
Even down to remembering how many.
Of my 3 children. But you do realize that sometimes you got a little carried away or you weren't paying attention because of WhatsApp and all these curses that we have now that have their place but can easily become your master rather than your servant.
Boy, do they hold it against you, yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. So all to say, my long-winded way of saying, Alex, they're around. We like to spend time together, so we'll often do things together on the weekend, and I tend to save it for them.
Right. Last question. I'm sure you're an avid reader. Fiction or non-fiction?
Both. I moved to fiction actually more as an adult, partly because fiction can be so interesting, and because I think fiction, good fiction, and I'm not snobbish about fiction. I think I read contemporary fiction, I read classical stuff. Yeah, kind of a mix. I've gone, as time goes by, not just the time for this podcast, but as the years go by, I will confess to saying, okay, like some of those classics that I really sort of had in mind to read as maybe as a younger man that I hadn't got around to yet. I thought maybe it's time to sort of get to those before long. So and I've hugely enjoyed them, and I think, again, without being too precious about it, I think the wonder of reading good literature and some of the classics is that it's not just for cocktail party conversation if people have cocktail parties anymore. It's, it can teach you how to live. I mean, they teach lessons in a kind of non-preachy way, which is the best kind of lesson you can give, right? Is when you read literature and you think, that's so true, and then apply it to yourself, possibly. I say yourself, myself, and so. Yeah, Brothers Karamazov, brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, it's on my list. Yeah. In fact, I was going to ask you for a recommendation. I got
one.
It. Yeah, got one for free.
Bring a bucket with a towel to mop your brow as you read it. Sometimes, I'll get any Russian novel, but brilliant.
Yeah, it's Dostoevsky.
Yeah, all the Russians. Yeah.
Goodness, that's hard work.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Lloyd. It's been terrific to have you.
Wonderful to be here.
Great conversation, and thanks for your insights into the world as we see it today. Really, really great to see you.
Wonderful to see you, Chris. All the best with us with these podcasts as well.
Thank you.